pre-dawn raid team scooped up 250 cartel operatives, all said to be connected to the new generation cartel known as the CJNG in Mexico.
April 6, 2015, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, after blocking a road in San Sebastián del Oeste, Jalisco, opened fire at a convoy of Jalisco State Police, killing 15 cops and wounding 5 more. Here are the 10 most disturbing crimes by cartel members. November 27, 1989, was the day Pablo Escobar committed one of the most infamous acts of terrorism in a bid to eliminate a threat. Born December 1, 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria became one of the most notorious drug lords in history. Escobar founded and led the Medellin Cartel, a powerful violent criminal organization dominating the cocaine trade during the 1980s and early 90s. Now, his rise to power began in the early 70s, starting off with smuggling marijuana, later moving on to cocaine, and by the mid-1980s, the Medellin cartel controlled a significant portion of the cocaine shipped to the U.S., earning billions annually. His immense wealth and influence allowed him to corrupt officials, bribe law enforcement, and intimidate or eliminate his enemies. Despite his criminal activities, Escobar was well known for some philanthropic efforts in Colombia. He built houses, sports arenas, and other infrastructure for the poor, which earned him a Robin Hood-like image amongst some Colombians. By 1982, Escobar served a brief stint in the Colombian Congress, leveraging his popularity and power. However, his reign of terror included countless murders and assassinations. He would target anyone who was opposing his reign, including politicians, law enforcement, and even journalists. Of all the crimes and acts of terrorism carried out by Escobar and the Medellin cartel, the most disturbing has to be the bombing of the Avianca Flight 203 on November 27, 1989. That attack was a targeted effort to assassinate the then presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria, who was campaigning on a platform of cracking down on drug cartels. Escobar, in his way, believed that killing this person would eliminate a significant threat to his operation. The domestic Avianca 203 from Bogota to Cali carried about 107 passengers and crew members. In here was a cartel operative carrying a bomb concealed in a briefcase. Just minutes after takeoff, the bomb detonated, causing the aircraft to break apart mid-air. All 107 people on board were killed instantly, including 2 Americans, along with 3 other victims on the ground, hit by falling debris. But here's the twist: the bombing failed in its primary objective. Why? Simply because Gaviria wasn't on the flight. However, the attack did draw international condemnation and intensified efforts to bring Escobar and his cartel to justice. His violent campaign led to a massive manhunt by Colombian authorities, with direct support from the U.S. due to the 2 Americans that were killed in the bombing. December 2, 1993, after a lengthy chase, Escobar was killed on a rooftop shootout with Colombian National Police in Medellin. His death marked the decline of the Medellin cartel, but his legacy of violence and corruption left a long-lasting impact on Colombia.
Mexican authorities have just released this closed-circuit video from inside the prison showing Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in the final moments before he broke out. So he paced back and forth. You saw that.
One of the most feared drug lords in history, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, with a history of overwhelming violence that wasn't just disturbing to viewers but also unnerving to the victims. Born on April 4, 1957 in Sinaloa, Mexico, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera rose to prominence as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, which became one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. His criminal career began in the 80s under the mentorship of Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, the godfather of Mexican drug cartels. Now, El Chapo's rise to power was marked by his ruthless tactics and innovative methods, including extensive use of tunneling for smuggling drugs across the U.S.-Mexican border. However, his operations involved trafficking vast quantities of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana, which generated billions in revenue. He would also bribe nearly every authoritative figure in Mexico, and once ordered his henchmen to incinerate the bodies of 2 of his enemies in a bonfire. But that's not all. His most disturbing crime was the rape of one of his mistresses, after which he was to have routinely raped girls, sometimes drugging them by placing a powdery substance in their drinks. This was said to have occurred in the Sierra Madre Mountains while he was hiding from Mexican authorities. A woman known as Comadre Maria regularly sent El Chapo photographs of girls for him to choose for a fee of $5,000, and after which the kingpin and members of his entourage often had the girls brought into the mountains to them. Pretty disturbing, right? El Chapo's notoriety would increase due to his dramatic prison escapes. In 2001, he escaped from the high-security Mexican prison hidden in a laundry cart. After being recaptured in 2014, he escaped in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug under his cell. His final capture in 2016, following a series of high-profile manhunts, led to his extradition of the U.S. in 2017. By 2019, El Chapo was found guilty on multiple charges, like drug trafficking, money laundering, involvement in organized crime, and was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 30 years. Now, his trial revealed the extensive corruption and brutality underpinning his operations. Guzman is currently serving his sentence at the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado. His life and criminal empire have left a lasting impact on global drug trafficking and law enforcement strategies.
The godmother of cocaine. She is Griselda Blanco, was a 69-year-old mother of four, seen here in one of her many mugshots. As of yesterday, she is dead.
You see, Griselda Blanco eliminated her husbands and co-workers to protect her cocaine empire and her children. However, these gruesome killings put her in the bad books of the rival cartels, and it brightened her spotlight on the map of authorities. Born February 14, 1943 in Santa Marta, Colombia, Griselda's innocent life only lasted a short while before she moved to Medellin with her mother, Ana Blanco. At the age of 3, there she would be exposed and infused into a life of crime that would disrupt her mentality at a very early age. A story out there says she allegedly kidnapped and killed a boy, and she began picking pockets before the age of 13. After escaping sexual abuse from her mother's boyfriend by running away at the age of 19, she resorted to theft until the age of 20 and was speculated to have possibly gone into prostitution. 1964 would be when Blanco illegally migrated to the U.S. with her husband and 3 children, settling in Queens, New York, where she quickly established a drug operation. But in 1975, she was indicted on a federal drug conspiracy charge alongside 30 of her subordinates, which made her flee back to Colombia. But she later returned to the U.S., relocating her operations to Miami in the late 1970s. Now, Blanco rose to power as a dominant figure in the world of cocaine, becoming the largest importer at the time, earning the moniker the Cocaine Godmother. It was said that she orchestrated the violent cocaine cowboy wars in the late 1970s and early 80s, which was heavily marked by drive-by shootings. Blanco was responsible for the gruesome deaths of 40 to about 250 people. Now, out of all the killings, the most notorious and disturbing has to be the killing of her first husband, Carlos Trujillo, over a business dispute. The second would have to be the killing of her second husband, Alberto Bravo, after she accused him of stealing millions from the business. The third will be her third husband, Dario Sepulveda, who was the father of her youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco, and kidnapped their son over a custody dispute. Well, Blanco paid to have Dario assassinated in Colombia and her son returned to her in the U.S. This cocaine empire generated around $80 million monthly, significantly impacting the economy of South Florida. She was revered by even the most notorious drug lords, including Escobar, who considered her a boss of the Medellin cartel. On February 17, 1985, Blanco was arrested and convicted of manufacturing, importing, and distributing cocaine, along with 3 counts of first-degree murder, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence. Unfortunately, during that time, 3 of her sons were brutally murdered. It was upon her release that she was deported to Colombia. Her luck was said to have run out on September 3, 2012, as she was shopping in Medellin. She was assassinated in a similar style to her methods, ending the reign of the infamous Black Widow and Cocaine Godmother. April 6, 2015. CJNG gunmen blocked the road in San Sebastián del Oeste, Jalisco, with a burning vehicle and opened fire at the convoy of Jalisco State Police. killing 15 policemen and wounding 5 more. Now, this is just one of many violent escapades carried out by El Mencho and his cartel. Born July 17, 1966, in the small town of Aguililla, Michoacán, Mexico, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, was originally a farm laborer before he moved to California in the 1980s, where he was arrested for drug trafficking and subsequently deported back to Mexico. Upon his return, El Mencho began his criminal career with the Milenio Cartel, working under the radar while also learning the drug trade. And as that cartel disintegrated, he co-founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, around 2010. Under his leadership, they quickly rose to prominence through a combination of ruthless violence, strategic alliances, and diversification into various illegal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and money laundering. El Mencho is known for his strategic mind and brutal enforcement tactics, gaining notoriety for using extreme violence against both enemies and law enforcement, including the infamous 2015 ambush in Jalisco, where CJNG operatives shot down a military chopper, killing many soldiers. The incident marked a significant escalation in the cartel's conflict with the Mexican government. Of all the violent and disturbing crimes attributed to El Mencho and his cartel, one horrific incident stands out: the 2011 mass killings of 35 people in Veracruz. On September 20th, 2011, CJNG dumps 2 trucks containing 35 dead bodies in broad daylight on a busy street at an underpass near a shopping mall in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. All of the corpses were alleged to be members of the rival cartel Los Zetas, although many were later found to be innocent civilians. Seeing the corpses, one could tell that they were severely tortured before being killed, as many would have their hands tied. This gruesome act was intended to instill fear and demonstrate the cartel's power and ruthlessness. Despite numerous attempts to capture El Mencho, he remains elusive, using that extensive network and financial resources to evade authorities. He's been indicted in the U.S. on various charges, including drug trafficking, murder, and involvement in organized crime. The U.S. government, in collaboration with the Mexican government, has even offered a multi-million-dollar reward for any information leading to his arrest. Under El Mencho's leadership, the CJNG has become one of the most powerful and violent trafficking organizations in the world, contributing significantly to Mexico's ongoing drug war and associated violence. January 25, 1988, Jean Ido Velasquez, also known as Popeye, a notorious sicario for the Medellin cartel, led by the infamous Escobar, kidnapped and brutally murdered Colombian politician Carlos Mato Hoyos. However, this was just one of the many gruesome murders committed by him, leading him to an unexpected end. Born on April 15, 1962, in Yarumal, Colombia, John Ido Velasquez joined the cartel in the late 1970s. He quickly rose through the ranks for his ruthless efficiency and loyalty to Escobar. He eventually became one of Escobar's most trusted enforcers, earning a reputation for his brutality and effectiveness. He claimed to have personally killed around 300 people and ordered the murders of around 3,000 more. Popeye was involved in various high-profile crimes, including bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings. His most infamous act has to be the assassination of Colombian presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán in 1989. This began following the Liberal Party convention. Galán used to get assassination threats, including calls to his home and flyers threatening his children. On August 4, 1989, an assassination attempt using an RPG in Medellin was thwarted by Colombian National Police Commander Valdemar Franklin Quintero and Medellin Mayor Pedro Pablo Peláez. Still, both Quintero and Peláez were killed weeks later. After these incidents, Galán and his family limited their travels after Colombian intelligence warned him of hitmen in Bogotá planning to kill him. Despite his staff's advice to avoid places like Soacha, Galán decided to go there. On August 18, 1989, Galán, protected by 18 bodyguards, was assassinated while preparing to give a speech in Soacha, with at least 10 others wounded in that attack. The event sparked a deadly conflict between the Colombian government and the drug cartel group known as the Extraditables. In 1992, following the death of Escobar, Velázquez surrendered to the authorities. He was convicted of numerous crimes, including murder and terrorism, and was given 30 years in prison. Now behind bars, he became a very controversial figure. He published a book, Surviving Pablo Escobar, and gained notoriety through media appearances and his YouTube channel, where he shared stories of his criminal past. Velázquez was released from prison in 2014 after serving 22 years. Upon his release, he continued attracting media attention, expressing remorse for his past actions, while maintaining a degree of infamy. However, his freedom was short-lived. In 2018, Velázquez was rearrested on charges of extortion and criminal conspiracy. He remained in custody until his death from stomach cancer on February 6, 2020, in Bogotá, Colombia. On April 18, 2008, Manuel Torres Felix went through a devastating loss. However, his grief-induced mental instability ultimately made him to commit heinous crimes and bring about his very own demise. Born back in February 28, 1958, in Cozalá, Sinaloa, Mexico, Manuel Torres Felix, better yet known as LM1 or El Ondeado, was a notorious figure in Mexico's drug trafficking world, known for his association with the powerful Sinaloa cartel. Torres Felix would start this back in the 80s, involved in small-scale drug trafficking operations, and would eventually rise to become one of the top lieutenants of the Sinaloa cartel, led by El Chapo. Because of the close relationship with his brother Javier Torres Felix, alias LJT, who was a key player in the cartel, Manuel would rise through the ranks pretty quick. Together, they were in some extensive drug trafficking operations, including the production, smuggling, and distribution of all kinds of drugs in the U.S. And after Javier's arrest and extradition to the U.S. in 2004, Manuel took on a more prominent role in the cartel. When it came to internal enforcement and territorial battles against rival groups, one of his most notorious acts was his involvement in the 2008 massacre of a family in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. This brutal crime, which targeted that of an enemy cartel member, highlighted Torres Felix's willingness to use extreme violence to assert dominance and control. April 18, 2008, when the BLO would assassinate his son, Atanasio Torres Acosta, in an ambushed attack, while also injuring his daughter Alondra and his sister-in-law Sandra Rivas Heredia, all in order to pass a message. They would leave a handwritten note at the crime scene from Arturo Beltran Leyva and Los Zetas. So with the death of his son, he reportedly went crazy and took revenge on the perpetrators by torturing them in his own home. This event marked the beginning of his rise as one of the most dangerous drug traffickers in the region, earning the nickname El Ondeado, the Crazy One. In the long run, his notoriety made him a top target for Mexican and U.S. authorities. But despite numerous attempts to capture him, he managed to evade arrest for years. However, his criminal activities eventually led to his downfall. On October 13, 2012, Mexican military would launch an operation to capture Torres Felix in the community of Oso Viejo, Sinaloa. And during this confrontation, Torres Felix was killed, ending his reign of terror. November 4, 2008. After the death of Alfredo Vizcarra Vega and the arrest of Zambada Niebla in March 2009, El Chino Antrax rose to the apex of the Sinaloa cartel. However, it wouldn't last long, as it put him in several run-ins with law enforcement and cleared a path to his very own demise. Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, better known as El Chino Antrax, was a prominent figure in Mexico's drug trafficking world, associated with the powerful Sinaloa cartel. Born June 15, 1980 in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Jose rose to notoriety as the leader of Los Antrax, an elite hit squad responsible for protecting key cartel members, including the top leader, Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Antrax began his criminal career in the late 1990s and early 2000s, working his way up the ranks with ruthless strategic acumen. Los Antrax under his command became infamous for some brutal enforcement tactics, including kidnappings, assassinations, and violent confrontations with rival cartels. These guys played a crucial role and helping Sinaloa maintain their drug trafficking operations across Mexico and into the U.S. Between 2011 and 13, Jose led Los Antrax into Los Cabos, Baja California Sur, against Los Zetas. On October 18, 2013, Chino Antrax reportedly committed one of his most disturbing crimes, which was ordering the murder of Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, a former Tijuana cartel leader, simply because of Felix's money laundering activities and his desire to assert control. It was during a family gathering that a gunman dressed as a clown approached and shot him in the head and chest. The assassination occurred at a children's party, after which the assailant quickly fled the scene. The Baja California authorities eventually identified Noah Castro R1 and a man named as R13 as the possible perpetrators. In December 2013, Arechiga Gamboa was arrested at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport while traveling under a false identity. In July 2014, he was extradited to the U.S., where he faced charges related to drug trafficking and organized crime. By 2015, he pled guilty to the drug trafficking charges and began cooperating with U.S. authorities. Despite that cooperation, Gamboa's fate would still take a violent turn. In May 2020, after being released from prison and placed under house arrest in San Diego, he disappeared. Shortly afterward, his body was found in Sinaloa, along with those of his sister and brother-in-law, showing signs of torture and execution-style killings, marking a violent end to a career steeped in bloodshed and terror.
¿Cuánto tiempo estuviste haciendo todo esto?
Como 9, 10 años.
¿Y en ese tiempo cuántos cuerpos?
600.
The assault on his beloved sister by members of the Sinaloa cartel in the area of Tijuana brought out a dark side which led him to commit the most inhumane and gruesome crime ever heard of in an act for revenge. However, his actions brought him to the attention of authorities, which led him to a situation where all he could foresee was doom. Born in 1964 in Sinaloa, Mexico, Meza Lopez started as a construction worker before being recruited by the Tijuana cartel. His work for the cartel began around the year 2000. Over time, he would become a key figure for his role in disposing bodies, kind of helping the cartel eliminate traces of their violent activities. The process he used was placing these bodies in large barrels filled with corrosive chemicals like caustic soda or hydrochloric acid. These substances would decompose the bodies into a sludge, which could then be easily disposed of, often in open fields or sewers. This really made it hard to gather some evidence. Now, El Pozolero's activities came to light due to a series of investigations and arrests that eventually led to his capture. On January 22, 2009, Mexican military would arrest Santiago Meza Lopez in the Baja Seasons neighborhood of Tijuana, in a house where he was partying pretty hard for several days. Although his immediate boss, Teodoro Garcia Cimendal, and 30 other people escaped from that place, his arrest was part of a broader crackdown on cartel activities by the Mexican government, which intensified its efforts to combat organized crime and drug trafficking. During his confession, Meza Lopez admitted to dissolving over 300 bodies, and some estimates put that number significantly higher. His admissions provided horrifying insights into the brutal tactics employed by the drug cartels in Mexico. It was after his arrest that he was given the moniker El Pozolero, or the Stew Maker. In 2012, he was given 10 years in prison and was due to be released in 2022, but many community members and law enforcement appealed for an extension of his sentence. On March 5, 2024, a court ruling came down, giving Meza Lopez, who's now 71 years old, an additional 30 years of incarceration for those gruesome crimes, making it unlikely for him to live past his incarceration. In 2005, Edgar Valdez Villarreal, better yet known as La Barbie, would commit many brutal crimes to assert dominance over the Los Zetas cartel. Born August 11, 1973 in Laredo, Texas, U.S., Edgar Valdez Villarreal, widely known as La Barbie due to his light complexion and blue eyes, was raised in a middle-class family, and he initially lived a relatively normal life, even playing football in high school. However, he gradually drifted into criminal activity, starting with small-time drug dealing, before making his way up to the upper ranks of the Mexican drug trade. In the early 2000s, Valdez made a significant move, by joining the BLO, that was initially part of the Sinaloa cartel before breaking away. This guy was ruthless, strategic, and had many connections in the U.S. He became a top lieutenant, known for his enforcement tactics, kidnappings, torture, executions, all of which he used to maintain control and expand the cartel's influence. Valdez was heavily involved in the cartel's operations in Guerrero and Morelos, which happened to be key drug trafficking routes. He would oversee these large-scale operations and would get into violent confrontations with rival gangs. One of the most notorious has to be the decapitation of 4 members of the Zetas cartel. The bodies of the victims were found in the Mexican state of Morelos, accompanied by a message from Barbie, where he served a warning to his enemies. In 2009, after the arrest and killing of cartel leader Arturo Beltran Leyva, a power struggle ensued within the cartel. Barbie found himself at odds with Hector Beltran Leyva, Arturo's brother, leading to a very violent internal conflict. This infighting, combined with the increased pressure from Mexican law enforcement, eventually led to Valdez's capture. August 30th, 2010. Mexican authorities arrested Barbie in a dramatic operation. His capture was seen as a significant victory in the fight against drug cartels. In 2015, he was extradited to the U.S., facing multiple charges, like drug trafficking and money laundering. In 2018, Valdez pled guilty and was sentenced to 49 years in a U.S. federal prison. August 6, 1971 was the day 17-year-old Julio Santana killed Antonio Martins, a 38-year-old man who raped a girl in a nearby village. This single act of violence turned the once innocent boy into what people came to know as the devil himself. The girl's father was enraged and desperate for vengeance against Antonio and wanted him dead, but he couldn't do the job. Instead, he hired Cicero, Julio's uncle, and a military policeman with a double life as a contract killer to do the job. Cicero, instead of doing it himself, tricked Julio into taking the shot, marking his initiation into a life of violence and murder. Julio hesitated but eventually killed Antonio from a 40-yard distance. This tormented him, conflicting with his staunch Catholic faith. Overwhelmed by guilt and confusion, Julio sought comfort from Cicero, who convinced him it was God's will and that absolution could be achieved through prayer. This first kill led to 499 more deaths, turning Julio into a notorious assassin with the alias, the Name of Death. Now, the term the Name of Death was coined by award-winning Brazilian reporter Cléster Cavalcante, who spent years uncovering the life of Julio Santana. 13 years ago, Cléster was investigating modern-day slave labor in the Amazon when a federal officer told him about some local assassins hired by ranchers. Intrigued, Cavalcante sought to meet one and eventually connected with Julio Santana, the deadliest hitman with 500 kills to his name. Despite initial resistance, Cavalcante's persistence paid off after 7 years, and Julio finally shared his story. Julio was introduced to assassination by his uncle during the Brazilian government's war against the Araguaia guerrillas. He fought passionately for the government, capturing guerrilla leader José Genuino, and kept a meticulous record of his kills in a notebook until he was too disgusted to continue. Among his many victims were a 22-year-old schoolteacher and this woman suspected of infidelity. His career would end in 2006 when he discovered his uncle was exploiting him financially, as he was earning only $70 a kill, compared to his uncle making around $1,000 to $3,000, depending on the target and circumstances, making Julio's profits pretty weak. And his wife demanded he choose between killing or his family. Well, Julio chose his family, and now leads a secluded life in Brazil, having shared his story only with Cavalcante. Or so we think.